Hello everyone, and welcome to Scary Tales. I know many of you love listening to these stories to relax or fall asleep. Before you drift off, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps. Story 1. It was a Friday night, and I was 10 years old at the time. Our family of 5 was home when everything changed. My older brother, 14 at the time, was out with his friends, probably causing trouble, when we got the dreaded phone call. I was in my room, playing a Star Wars video game, when I heard my mom start crying hysterically. I rushed out of my room, terrified, and saw her on the phone with someone from the hospital. I remember hearing her say that my brother had been hit by a car. My heart dropped. The next few moments were a blur of chaos. My parents rushing to get their coats, my little sister, 5 years old, pulled from her room, and my mom still crying. They quickly asked me if I was okay staying home alone. I said yes, though I was scared out of my mind. They left, and I was left alone in the house. I was deeply worried about my brother, but I didn't want to go to the hospital and see him hurt. I think my parents didn't want my sister and me to go either. Thankfully, my brother's injury wasn't too serious, but it would be the reason I ended up home alone that night. Before leaving, my dad had tried to calm my mom down, telling her my brother would be okay. His words made me feel a little better, but I still couldn't shake the fear. I continued playing the game for a couple more hours, trying to distract myself from the worry. It was past midnight when I heard the front door open. My bedroom door was closed, and I had just crawled into bed. I turned off the TV and PlayStation and grabbed my Game Boy to continue playing. I strained to hear if my parents had come back, but I heard nothing. I tried to listen for their voices or any signs that my brother was with them. Nothing. A sinking feeling hit me. Something didn't feel right. I quietly opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. I walked over to the ledge that overlooked the living room, and that's when I froze. There were 3 tall figures standing in the living room. They weren't my family. I was paralyzed with fear. My heart raced as I hurried back into my room, closing the door as quietly as I could. But I wasn't quiet enough. I knew they must have heard the door click shut. Panic set in. I rushed to my closet and hid behind a pile of old clothes and boxes. My body was shaking as I sat there in the dark, waiting for what felt like forever, fearing the worst. I was certain they were going to find me. And then the door creaked open. I could hear footsteps in my room. 1 person, maybe 2. They walked to my bed and started moving my covers around. Silence. Then the footsteps moved closer to the closet. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. The closet door slowly opened. My heart pounded in my chest, and I sat completely still, hoping they wouldn't see me. The door stayed open for what felt like an eternity, about 20 seconds. I didn't dare move or look up. Then finally, the door closed, and the footsteps retreated. They left the room. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours before I finally heard the front door open again. My parents were home. I rushed downstairs to them, trembling. The front door had been left ajar. The thieves had broken in and stolen several valuables from the house. It was a night that went from bad to worse. My parents had been so rushed when they left for the hospital that they hadn't locked the door properly. Looking back now, I wonder what would have happened if the person who opened the closet had seen me. Maybe they just wanted to rob the house and never meant to hurt me. Or maybe they didn't see me at all. Either way, I narrowly escaped injury, or worse. I'll never forget that night, and it still haunts me to this day. Story 2. My sister and I live in a 2-floor house, a mother-daughter home, meaning it has 2 separate kitchens. She occupies the downstairs apartment, while I stay upstairs. Since she spends most nights at her boyfriend's place, I'm often home alone. I'm 30 years old. I shouldn't let that bother me, but sometimes I do. One night, I was home alone, sitting on my couch in the living room watching a scary movie. My section of the house has an open layout, so the living room, dining area, and kitchen blend into one big space. The couch sits right in the middle of the room, which means that when I watch TV, my back is exposed to the large, darkened space behind me. For someone who gets easily spooked, it wouldn't be the most comfortable place to sit alone at night. I like to think I'm not the only grown man who occasionally glances over his shoulder while watching horror movies in the dark. And that's exactly what I kept doing, every few minutes, throwing a quick look behind me. The dim glow from the TV was the only thing keeping the room from being completely swallowed by darkness. After the movie ended, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights, and went to bed. I slept for maybe 2 hours. Then, around 1 a.m., I suddenly woke up. At first I wasn't sure why. I just lay there in the dark, trying to shake off the drowsiness. Then I heard it. My sister's voice. It was coming from downstairs. She wasn't knocking or calling me from outside. It sounded like she was already inside the house. I couldn't make out exactly what she was saying, but it was definitely her voice. Maybe she was calling for me. Maybe she was arguing with her boyfriend. I wasn't thinking clearly. Still half asleep, I got out of bed and stepped into the pitch-black hallway. I turned on the light, then made my way toward the living room. That's when I heard it again. My sister was calling my name. Her voice was coming from downstairs. I called back. "What is it?" As I headed down, the stairwell was dark, and I fumbled for the light switch in the foyer but couldn't find it. I kept moving forward, following the sound of her voice. Her kitchen was just ahead, so I reached for the nearest light switch and flicked it on. A soft yellow glow filled the room, slowly growing brighter. But there was no one there. No sign of my sister. No sign of her boyfriend. Her bedroom door was slightly open, so I stepped inside. Empty. I called her name, louder this time. Silence. Then, just as I turned to leave, I heard something fall. It came from inside her bedroom. My stomach tightened. I had just checked that room. It was empty. I didn't stick around to investigate. My feet moved on their own, carrying me up the stairs faster than I'd like to admit. I shut my bedroom door and locked it behind me. My heart was racing as I grabbed my phone and called my sister. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I sat there, locked in my room, trying to convince myself that I had imagined everything. Maybe I was just groggy. Maybe I was dreaming. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my sister. Her. "Why did you call me at 1 a.m.? I immediately replied, "Were you home last night?" Her response came quickly. "No, I stayed at my boyfriend's." I felt a chill run down my spine. After getting up, I went downstairs to check her room. I wanted to see what had fallen the night before. But there was nothing on the floor. Not a single object that could have made that noise. I told myself I must have imagined everything. That's the version I want to believe. Because the alternative is too terrifying to think about. Story 3. I was left home alone a lot as a kid. My mom was a single parent for most of my childhood, working long shifts as an RN. My older brother had already gone off to college, so on many nights it was just me in the house. This was one of those nights. It was a weekend, and my mom was working overnight. Since I had the house to myself, I invited over a girl named Molly. We had been talking for a while, and she came over to hang out. We watched a couple of movies, just enjoying the night. But eventually she had to go home. Her parents didn't like her staying out late. Once she left, I stayed in my room upstairs, watching TV in bed. My bedroom faced the backyard, which had a wooden deck with a few chairs scattered around. That's when I heard it. A dragging sound. Someone was moving one of the chairs outside. I sat up and looked out my window. There was someone sitting in one of the deck chairs. At first, I thought it was Molly. She had only left about 10 minutes ago. Maybe she forgot something and came back. I called out, "Molly?" The figure looked up at me. It wasn't her. I pulled away from the window immediately, my heart pounding. I hadn't recognized the person in the darkness, but I knew for sure it wasn't anyone I knew. Trying to make sense of it, I grabbed my phone and texted a few close friends in our group chat. Maybe one of them was messing with me, but the ones who responded all said no, asking what I was talking about. Deep down, I already knew it wasn't one of my friends. None of them would go this far just to scare me. Still, I needed to check again. Slowly I crept back toward the window and peered outside. He was still there, still sitting in the chair, still looking up at my window. My stomach dropped. He had definitely seen me. I backed away again and quickly turned off my TV. My room was now completely dark. I sat in bed, pulling my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. I didn't even want to turn my phone screen on. I was afraid he would see the light. I barely breathed, terrified that even the smallest sound would let him know I was still there. Minutes passed. 5, maybe more. Surely he was gone by now. I forced myself to look again. He was still there, still staring. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I had no choice. I had to confront him. Summoning what little courage I had, I leaned out the window and called down, "What do you want?" The man's shoulders started to shake. At first, I thought he was crying. Then I heard it, a faint wheezing sound. He was laughing. Not normal laughter, though. There was no actual sound, just his body shaking, and this eerie, breathy wheeze. I swallowed hard and forced out, "Please, just go away." He didn't respond. I backed away from the window again and sat on my bed, paralyzed with fear. For some reason, I was too scared to call the police. Maybe I thought I was overreacting. Maybe I was just in shock. Then I heard it. The sound of the back door being pushed. He was trying to get inside. Panic surged through me. I bolted out of my room and crouched at the top of the stairs, listening. My whole body was tense, waiting for the next sound. A few seconds later, I heard the front doorknob rattling. He was trying that door now. I held my breath. He pushed against the door. But then, silence. He gave up. For the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled. My hands were shaking as I tiptoed back to my room and locked the window. I yanked the curtains shut. If the doors hadn't been locked, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I was 14. I was small. I was weak. If he had gotten inside, there was nothing I could have done. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I stayed in my bed, hidden under the covers, until my mom got home around 9 a.m. When I told her what happened, she was furious. Not at the man, but at me. "Why didn't you call 911? She demanded. I had no answer. Looking back, I know how stupid I was. But at that moment, I was just a terrified kid who didn't know what to do. And to this day, I still wonder, if I hadn't locked those doors, would I even be here to tell this story? Story 4. When I was a teenager, I had the house to myself for an entire week, which was a rare occurrence. My parents didn't go out much, but my mom's rich friend, Patty, invited them on a trip she was paying for. As an only child, I was left alone in our house in Newark, Ohio. The house was in a quiet area, surrounded by woods, and there weren't many cars passing by. The backyard had a huge deck that overlooked the woods, a fish pond, and even an above-ground pool. It was a Thursday night in July 2013, and I remember being outside on the deck, smoking weed, and playing music on my speaker. That's when it started. I thought I heard a voice from the woods. At first, I didn't think much of it. I lowered the music and listened for a bit, but the voice didn't repeat, so I turned the music back up. Then, I heard the voice again, this time more clearly. A male voice calling, "Hey, over here." It was coming from the woods, about 20 to 30 yards away from the deck. At first, I didn't think it was directed at me. Maybe just some kids playing manhunt or something. But then it called out again, "Hey, over here. We need help." This time, something felt off. The voice was too deep to be a kid's, and hearing someone yell for help, especially in the middle of the woods, made my stomach twist. I was starting to feel uneasy, but I still wasn't sure if the voice was meant for me. Then it came again. "Straight in front of you. Please come help us." Now, I was starting to think this voice was definitely calling for me. I reluctantly called back, "Who is that?" The voice answered, "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." I hesitated, confused. "What does that mean?" I asked. The voice replied, "Just please, come help, straight in front of you." I got up from my seat and walked down the steps of the deck, heading towards the woods. "I'm coming." "Where are you?" I called out. The voice replied instantly, "Right in front of you. I see you." I stopped in my tracks. "Wait, are you alone? Or with someone?" I asked. There was no answer. At that moment, my gut told me something was wrong. I turned around and walked quickly back towards the house. I didn't even want to turn my back to the woods. It took me that long to realize how suspicious the whole situation felt. When I reached the deck, the voice didn't say anything else. If it were real, they would have said something. Anything to keep me from leaving. The silence was unsettling. I went inside, locked all the doors, and tried to calm down. I still felt high from the weed, which I think made me more trusting at first. But now I was starting to feel paranoid. I sat in the living room for a while, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Then I heard the voice again, but this time it was much closer. Definitely in the backyard. I heard splashing, maybe from the pool or the pond. I rushed to the window and looked outside, but at first I didn't see anyone. Then the voice came again. "I see you," followed by a laugh. I spotted him. He was hidden behind the pool, just his head visible in the dark. His medium-length hair was all I could make out. I quickly shut the blinds and tried to ignore him, hoping he'd lose interest. But then, everything escalated. There was a horrible, aggressive banging on the window. The man was screaming, "Help!" on the other side. I screamed back at the top of my lungs, "You freak! The police are coming!" I yelled it over and over, trying to sound crazier than him. I heard him laugh, his voice fading away as he walked off. I sat back down on the couch, trembling and out of breath. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Eventually, it seemed like he gave up, and I was left alone in the house. Despite everything that happened, I managed to get a good night's sleep, thanks to the weed still in my system. But looking back, I wonder how I would have handled the situation if I wasn't high. The whole thing made me paranoid about who I'd open my door to in the future. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.